Jesse had a son by the name of David. And the Bible tells you that King David comes through the genealogy of Ruth. And that is important to understand, because when David was here and Samuel came to anoint him, oh, and that's my third story, in the city of Bethlehem, you have to understand that he owned, through Jesse, or Jesse, David's father, owned the very grain fields that Boaz had owned, because that was the great-great-great-grandfather of King David. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes we read the Bible and we don't always put those little things together. Now let's look at David. David was a king that was anointed by Samuel. It's interesting, however, that when you read the Bible, it tells us in the Word of God that Israel wanted a king, and so God raised up King Saul to be the king of Israel. Now, King Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin. But don't forget that Benjamin was the son that was born near Bethlehem. And so we have that little link about him being from the tribe of Benjamin, Benjamin meaning the son of my right hand. I personally believe that the Jewish people in King Saul's day felt that because he was from Benjamin, and Benjamin means the son of the right hand, that he would be a great leader. Well, King Saul really failed miserably. The Spirit of God departed from him. So God raised up a king from Bethlehem who was named David, and this is an interesting story. He's from the tribe of Judah. Now, why is that important? Because if you read the book of Genesis, when Jacob was dying, he predicted that the blessing was going to come through the tribe of Judah. So why did Samuel not just anoint somebody in the first place from the tribe of Judah? Why did Samuel anoint Saul, who is from the tribe of Benjamin, when the prophecy says you have to come from the tribe of Judah? Here is a clue, and you've got to hear this. If you'll read the Bible, Judah, the man, had a daughter-in-law, and that daughter-in-law's name is Tamar. And Tamar was married to Judah's son, and he died. She marries the other son, and he dies. And finally, there's no other sons to marry, so Judah says, I have a younger son, and when he grows up, you can marry him. Well, when the boy grew up, he let him marry somebody else, which was really against the tradition of the day of carrying on the name of the family. Tamar got mad. And I tell you, if I was writing the Bible, I wouldn't have put this in there, to be honest with you. But the Bible tells about the facts of life in people's lives. Tamar dressed up like a prostitute, went into Judah, became pregnant through Judah, and had two sons, Zered and Pharez. Now, why is that important for you to understand that? Here's why it's important, and I don't want you to miss this. This is very important. Because if you look at the law of Moses, now remember, in David's day, the law of Moses existed. The law of Moses was being taught in King David's time, all right? If you look at the law of Moses, here's what it says. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 2 and 3, an illegitimate child or person cannot enter the door of the tabernacle up to the 10th generation. Then it says, a Moabite shall not enter the tabernacle up to the 10th generation. Now watch this. You have Ruth, who was a Moabite, you see, but Ruth is a convert to Judaism, or to the Jewish religion, so that causes her to become, by faith, I said, justified by faith. But here's the point. If you look, and you look at that law of Deuteronomy 23 that says you can't enter the congregation to the 10th generation, you go and count it. From Judah, who sinned with Tamar, who had two illegitimate children, all the way up to Saul, you have that 10-generational time frame. The reason God waited, to raise up David is he broke the 10th generational curse that is found in the book of Deuteronomy. So God waited after 10 generations to raise up a king from the tribe of Judah. And that's the reason I believe King Saul from Benjamin was king first before David, because that 10-generational cycle there had to be broken. So we see here how that Bethlehem, the Bethlehem factor, is linked into not only the birth of Jesus, but the history of showing the pictures of the Messiah all the way back to Genesis chapter 35. Now, when we come into the New Testament, we talk about the birth of Christ. There are two main genealogies mentioned in the New Testament concerning Christ's birth. One is found in Matthew's Gospel, and the other was found in St. Luke's Gospel. Now, in Matthew's Gospel, if you'll check it out, it starts with Abraham, and it goes forward to Jesus. and he lists 42 generations there. Then if you will go back and check with Luke's genealogy of the Messiah, Jesus, you'll discover that he begins with Jesus and starts going backwards all the way to Adam, and there's somewhere in the neighborhood, and I may be off 1 or 2 on this, but somewhere in the neighborhood about 75 persons listed in the genealogy there in Luke's gospel. Now, as an interesting point, if you read Matthew chapter 1, verse 17 about the genealogies of Jesus, here's what you'll discover. That in those genealogies, it says that from Abraham to David is 14 generations, from David to Babylon is 14 generations, from Babylon to Christ is 14 generations. I want to ask you a question. Why is the number 14 mentioned 3 times? 14, 14, 14. Because he, the Messiah, would be the son of David. Now, if you take the name David in Hebrew, it's a Dalid and a Vav and a Dalid. Those are Hebrew letters. 3 Hebrew letters, a Dalid, Vav, and Dalid. Every Hebrew letter has a number of value to it. If you look at the Dalid, its value is 4. The Vav's value is 6. The Dalid's value is 4. And so what you end up with is when you add it up, it's 14. So the name of David adds up into this system that's called gematria, Hebrew mathematics, to the number 14. And so because of that, some people believe that Matthew in his day was cryptically showing how that Jesus was linked to the son of David, and was the son of David, and was the Messiah by using that 14, 14, 14 pattern. Now, I said a moment ago I wanted women to pay careful attention as I'm in Bethlehem during this season sharing with you a message. The reason I want women to pay careful attention is because of this. In the genealogies of Jesus, in Matthew's Gospel, normally in any Hebrew genealogy, only men are going to be listed. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat. It's always the men. Why? Because the promise is to the seed, and it takes the seed of the man to produce the child. However, let me share this with you, and I think you'll find this extremely interesting, that there are 5 women listed in the genealogies of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. Here they are. First of all is you have Tamar, you have Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, who in Matthew is called the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and you've got Mary. I have a question for you. Why would Matthew put 5 women in the genealogies of Jesus? And why would he put Rahab, watch this, why would he put Rahab, who was an ex-harlot? Why would he put Tamar, who was an ex-prostitute, who really became a prostitute, an adulteress? Why would he put Bathsheba, who was an adulterer? Why would he put Ruth, who's a minority from Moab? And of course, we've got Mary there, who's his mother. We can understand Mary being there. And I believe the Lord spoke to me something, and I want women, I want you to hear me right now. I want you to especially hear what I'm going to tell you. If you look at the 5 women, I call them the 5 women in Jesus' life. Mary represents the woman who's perfect, grew up in church, knows everything about God, can't find a fault in her. And I say this very truly, sincerely. It reminds me of my wife. People who know my wife call her Mary. She's about the most perfect woman. We just call her the Proverbs 31 woman. And I'm serious when I say that. So she's like the woman, you can't find any fault in her. You never see her do anything wrong. You never hear of her doing anything wrong. And she's just that kind of woman. So there are people in the church that have just been raised in church, and they're good people, and they've been that way most of their life. However, look at Bathsheba. She's the church woman who had a covenant with God, who knew, but she fell into sin. So there's people that are in church who still fall into sin even though they love the Lord. They fall into some trap of sin. Then you have Ruth, who's the minority. I mean, she was a minority. She was a Moabite. She was darker complected than the Jews. So you have many women in churches who are in the minorities. They're not in the majority of the population. They're a minority as far as the population or social status is concerned. And then you have Tamar. She's the woman who got bitter. I mean, she got bitter and she wanted revenge. And you have people in the church who have an understanding of God, but something happens and it makes them bitter. And when you begin to look at Ruth, the minority, Tamar, who was bitter, Bathsheba, who had a covenant with God, but yet she fell. You know why those 5 women are in the genealogies? Now, I want you to hear me, because it's a picture of the 5 types of women found in every church in the world. Every church in the world. That's the 5 types of women. Now, here's what the Lord is saying through those genealogies. It doesn't matter if you're an ex-prostitute. It doesn't matter if you're in the minority. It doesn't matter, like some of the other ones that we've talked about here, that if you have got bitter, God can take you, if you will allow Him to, change your bitterness, change your uncleanness, change that life of sin, turn your life around, and make something good out of your life. These women are listed in the genealogies of the Messiah of the world. And I believe God put them there to show women around the world it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how you've lived. You need to change your destiny. You need to change your future. And during this season where we're celebrating the birth of Christ, and as I said earlier, we don't know that he was actually born at this day, but it's a